to the needs of typically the women when they get back. There are also women who have been in service themselves who have been victimized, and we're just kind of trying to scratch the surface on that. But in addition to the military, we provide training to law enforcement, lethality assessment. We provide training to social workers. I said law enforcement. We just outreach to a lot of different places.
Let me, if I could follow, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly.
What I was concerned about is, I know boots are on the ground, but I often get called. Lower-ranking military people cannot afford legal services. There are a whole lot of lawyers in Liberty County. A lot of them do real good. They ain't too big, a little pro bono along, but it costs. And when you're an E4 or the spouse are not on the list of an E4, just happen to have followed him to Fort Stewart. They're not listed on anything. Most higher-ranking military people are threat about their career. But when you just followed and you're living in, it's a real problem. And people have a lot of problems getting help down there. It's very difficult. So I'm real concerned about the effectiveness or the availability of services, particularly because most of the domestic shelters, one in particular that out of Liberty County serves 5 counties, they sell everything from peanuts to pies just to keep the doors open. And it's tough if you get involved in domestic violence down in southeast Georgia.
Understand, and I would love to have an opportunity to talk with you more about that and get our staff in our office in Savannah, which do circuit ride to those areas and try to meet the need. But we can't meet all the need. This funding will help us do a little bit more.
The mule gets tired between Savannah and Hinesville.
Right.
I do understand, Representative, there's a very well thought out bill that's being carried by a wonderful representative that may address some of this. My bill.
I don't know why I guessed that.
No one picked up on the joke, so I was trying
You
to add.
embellish.
Any other questions from members of the committee? Well, I thought it was. Thank you very much. I think you're on 6.4.3.
Oh, yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that you all understood that the request that had been requested by the Council of Probate Court Judges has been withdrawn. So I just wanted to make sure we are working with that council, and I think that things are going very well. So the next one I would bring to your attention is 6.4.3. This is an increase in funds for the Council of Municipal Court Judges. They have, for a number of years, been operating at about $16,000 a year. The Administrative Office of the Courts does provide services to them, but they are wanting to do some additional things. And so they have put in a request for some general operating fund. They have developed for the municipal courts a standard operating procedure, which they would like to publish not only in print form, but also in a couple of different media forms. And they need some postage and printing and other for that. That's about $1,795. They also have been involved in strategic planning in the past. They want to not only update but expand their strategic planning effort, and to do that they would like to have about $10,000 to hire a facilitator to work with them through that over the next year. And then also, as many of our various judges groups meet in districts around the state, more local regional meetings, they would like for their council to have that ability too, and so they have put together a budget for travel that would help facilitate those district meetings. So that is the sum total of what comes together to an enhancement request of $21,795.
The facilitator was $10,000.
Yes.
Any questions from the committee? Okay.
Okay. 6.44, this is one that I talked to you about in the 2015 budget. For the most part, this is the County and Municipal Probation Advisory Council. The total request for FY16 is $277,167. That is an amount to help increase some staff salaries to bring them into competitive compliance with other state agencies, but it primarily pays for 3 compliance monitors. You'll remember that the Department of Audits had looked at this program and made several recommendations. Many of those were around the compliance auditing piece, and in order to do that, we got an additional position last year and have increased the number of audits. Now we are asking for 3 additional ones in order to go further with that. The one thing I want to make sure that we understand is the 3 positions that we're asking for in the 15, and these 3 positions are the same, but I believe they have to be requested in both in order to make sure they get into continuation. The other piece is in the 15, we had amended, the funds would have purchased a vehicle as well. These positions are mostly traveling, and so if it is determined that a car isn't purchased in amended 15, we will need to have it into this request. So I just want to make sure of that. Now I also have Shavonda Fields here, who is our program manager for this program, if you have some questions about the specific program.
Representative Hightower.
Just one. You said this money included catching some other employees up to standards with other state agencies. So it includes, outside of these 3, you're including raises for other individuals. Is
Yes.
that right?
Yes.
Can you break those out a little bit?
Shavonda can speak to that.
Currently, the current employees now do not make as much as we brought in the employee we brought in last year that you all gave us last year, and most of the employees make less than a secretary makes, and they are doing a lot of travel, as Marla mentioned.
Okay. Do you have any numbers on what they're making and what they will be after this?
Yes.
Another expert.
When these compliance positions were initially funded in 2007, the SIMPAC was housed in Macon, and the starting salary for the compliance positions was $32,000 a year. And staff was hired at $32,000 a year, and her existing staff, 1 employee, has been working almost 3 years and has been increased to approximately $34,500. And so today, starting salary is still between $32,000 and $34,000 a year for the current compliance monitor positions. Her 3 positions all make less than $40,000 a year, with 2 of them making significantly less than that.
And if we were to do this increase, what would they be making after this?
The starting salary would be comparable with executive branch agencies, with these positions at $43,000 a year.
And that would be for all positions, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
For the compliance monitor positions, not an administrative position that is only part-time.
Okay. And if we were to do this, we're adding 3. How many are out there now?
3.
So we're doing it to 6, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
We're going to have to pick it up a little bit. We're running a little behind. If you could address 6.4.6 and .8 together, I'd appreciate it.
6.4.6, these 2, this is to replace some private foundation funding. We have worked in the area of foster care, finding permanent placements for children in foster care. There's a Supreme Court committee that has been federally funded for a number of years, but there are also children who fall through the cracks, children who become institutionalized, children who, for whatever reason, may age out of the system before a permanent placement has been found for them. Using private foundation funds over the past 5 years, we have been able to train a cadre of attorneys who work with teams of people in the community, in the executive branch, in order to identify and focus on these children and try to bring them to a good outcome in our system. Tom Rawlings is here. He has been in the juvenile system in a number of iterations, including judge, and he is also now one of our contract attorneys who works on this project, who can answer questions if you have.
Any questions from the committee? Right, I'm very suspicious of people. No, thank you for your service.
Those are grant monies that are no longer, they've expired, so we're trying to keep
We
up
will
with
not. What's happened is our program was brought, we developed it. Michelle Barkley, who's our wonderful director of this program, she had this idea, was able to get funding for it. We've become a model for other states. And she's been out, they've sent her around the country. Well, now the Casey folks who are responsible for the funding said, okay, we've given Georgia 5 years of funding. We want to put it in these other states now. So we are asking $175,000 to replace that. This is money that is used for contract people like Tom Rawlings here. It doesn't, we're not doing salaries and benefits and overhead and that kind of thing, but we really get a lot of bang for the buck on these. And I'm sure he has some really success stories that he could share with you that would make you cry.
I know it's a busy day, but I will say this. As you all know, our goal with the child welfare system is to take children and put them in a permanent, safe, stable home. All the kids we're working with in this project have been kind of stuck in the system for a long time. Yet in 2013, for example, and every 5 years we've been involved, we have to increase out the permanent outcomes for children by 50%. And so it's a really good use of funds. And I think bringing in someone from the outside to sort of bust through the bottlenecks that develop in these cases would be very successful. Thank you.
And the last one, 6.4.8, is a request from the Council of Magistrate Court Judges, and Judge Turner would like to speak to you about this one.
Thank you, Marla. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Robert Turner. I'm from Warner Robins. I'm the Chief Magistrate in Houston County and the Vice President of the Council of Magistrate Court Judges. I don't know whether you are aware of it or not, but in the past year, the Council has developed an online tool that allows court users to access the magistrate court forms, fill out the forms, print them, be able to file them, and that's available online to anyone with internet access. It's free. It costs them nothing. The Council incurred the cost of the development of this software through a third-party vendor. It's currently available and being used a lot already through our Council's statewide website. The first year of operation, which we're in right now, the web hosting fees for that was donated by the software developer who we paid to develop the software. This request of $10,000 for fiscal year 16 is entirely to be used for payment of fees for web hosting this product for the next year to keep it available and accessible. The cost benefit of this project, for this small cost, it is a great big benefit to Georgia's low-income citizens and small business owners who routinely file and defend cases in our magistrate courts, the bulk of which are done with folks pro se, whether they're small business owners or Georgia's low-income citizens, especially those defending cases filed there. I'll be happy to answer any questions about the request.
There are no questions. If I could bring you back to Judge, thank you very much. And I am very familiar with it, so that's a good program. I think I may have missed it on the 6.4.6, increase funds to improve and expand training for members of the Georgia Council of Court Administrators.
Yes, yes. The Georgia Council of Court Administrators is, well, I will tell you, it's one of the only statutorily created councils in the country. We have that here. And they have had some state funding. This group is responsible for training of court administrators, clerks, coordinators in various accountability courts. It's a membership organization. They have partnered with the Administrative Office of the Courts in doing some additional training. They have had a contract, well, an agreement rather, with Michigan State University to provide programming. They have 2 levels of certification for court administrators. It's very good programming for people like me and others who are out working in the courts to learn about what kinds of things they might do. They are requesting some funds in order to expand the program. We have been working with the National Center for State Courts with their Institute for Court Management to bring that programming to Georgia. Right now, in order for our Georgia folks to take advantage of that kind of programming is very expensive because they have to travel out of state and pay hefty tuition fees. By training people here in Georgia in order to be facilitators in that programming, we're able to do it at a much reduced cost. So this is another area where we are looking at training and our court professionals and making them the best they can be, and that will help our courts be the best that they can be. So that's basically what the request is about. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Did I miss anything on? Okay.
I think you got it.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all very
You
much.
have one
Oh,
question?
yes.
Okay, Representative Ballinger, I'm sorry.
I do apologize. You mentioned the training. Was it for the state court or the superior courts, or what court system were we training for that we're trying to bring in for this for?
The Council of Court Administrators is basically a staff kind of thing.
Yeah.
Although we don't turn judges away if they want to come and participate in the training. But it's staff of all courts. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yes.
That's what I was trying to get at.
It's
I was
all
like,
classes of court.
Thank you.
I mean, the clerk of the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals have been participants. So,
all right.
yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
all the way down. Is that it?
Thank you very much.
Thank you so
I appreciate
much.
it. Very complete,
Appreciate it.
and the committee appreciates it too. Prosecuting attorneys, Ms. Fahas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. I'm joined by David Miller. He is the budget chair of the District Attorneys Association. He's going to help in part of the presentation. We are on sections 8.1 and sections 8.3, the District Attorneys and the Prosecuting Attorneys Council. If I could just briefly say this would be my third opportunity in this role to present a budget to the state budget, and I do want to at least bring the committee to a couple of facts that are different now than they were in 2012, the first time we did that. The first time we presented a budget in 2012, we were under 12 audit findings and management comments. We had a $750,000 deficit on our books that was a carryover from a previous line item veto that we can discuss. And quite frankly, we were operating in 2 accounting software programs where we had parallel books. I'd like to report today that we are currently under no audit findings, that we have eliminated the deficit amount that was in on our previous books, and that we have completely brought our books together and have complete transparency of all monies that belong to the state of Georgia. With me today also is District Attorneys Danny Porter, Burt Poston, Tracy Lawson, Lee Patterson, and Dick Donovan. Quickly, I want to catch you up on where we're at on the accountability courts, obviously part of the criminal justice reinvestment program that we've been a part of. That deal has gone on over the last 3 years, and it has started to staff the assistant DAs necessary in the DA's offices for these courts. As you know, in 1997, we started with basically no accountability courts, and there are now over 130 operating in this state. Phase 1 of that was in the 2014 appropriations, and it funded the first 12 assistant DAs. Those were implemented within that year. Phase 2 was an appropriation in 2015 that implemented an additional 15. You have a map there that shows you what we've been able to do from an implement standpoint. We've used priorities like how many courts were there, how many participants were there, and other things to put those 27 assistant DAs at work, and those positions are currently filled.
Mr. Phelps, could I hold you just a second while members of the committee get the handout?
Oh, I apologize. No. I thought that was already there. I thought it should have been the first thing I looked at.
Go ahead, sir.
I think I'm over to about page 5, which is the map you see. Mm-hmm. It says update implementation of accountability court ADAs. Mm-hmm. That's a picture of where we're at today. So the first new budget request we talk about actually corresponds to your line 8.23. What that is the third phase, an additional 11 assistant DAs for accountability courts. Specifically, the circuits for that are listed: the Alapaha, the Bell Forsyth, the Douglas, the Dublin, Eastern, the Griffin, the Macon, the Northern, the South Georgia, and the Southwestern, and the Talladega judicial circuits. That would bring it to a total of 38 assistant DAs, and that would make every DA's office that currently functions in an accountability court whole. That would leave 11 circuits that would not have an additional assistant, but at this time, those circuits do not have accountability courts. So that's what that first request is the continuation of that 3-year program to fund those courts. The next new item that we would discuss is listed at your line 8.2.4. This, again, is part of the juvenile reinvestment, and this is the first of a funding mechanism for assistant DAs in juvenile courts. As you remember, last year we had a bill that proposed funding juvenile court prosecution and public defenders, and it used a formula that we get from a matrix that's currently used to fund juvenile courts with state dollars. It identified the need for at least 96 assistant DAs to fully fund juvenile court in this state, at least from the prosecution standpoint. We're realistic about the fact that that will take some time. Another issue that got raised after juvenile reform was this issue of CHINs, or Children in Need of Services, and that's the old deprivation type cases. What we've done with the consent and work with the governor's office, OPB, and with criminal justice reform this time, we've fixed some problems in those code sections. One specifically that authorizes, and this is in some new legislation, would authorize the DA to actually participate in the CHINs cases moving forward. In doing so, we also want to ease forward in properly funding prosecution from the state standpoint. So 8.21 is for the first basically 15 prosecutors to go where it's needed the most.
8.24, you mean?
Yes, sir. 8.2.4. Yes, sir. The next thing we're going to talk about, and I'm going to segue into letting David Miller come talk about, but let me tell you a little bit about our operational challenges. And this is about our existing personnel, where we have traditionally seen somewhere between a 5 to 6% turnover. The last 2 years, specifically fiscal year 13 and fiscal year 14, we've averaged almost an 11% turnover in both of those 2 years, from both assistant DAs leaving us and assistant DAs retiring. As you'll go to the next slide, you'll see what that equates to. We evaluated the level at which that assistant DA is at when they leave us versus what we're hiring to replace it. And as you'll see, the average assistant DA that has left us in the last 2 years is at almost 7 years experience as a prosecutor. And we're replacing that individual with prosecutors with less than 2 years experience. So we're definitely seeing a change in our workforce, and District Attorney Miller is going to talk a little bit about that, if I could turn over the mic.
I'm going to go back just a minute and address that money that we were in the hole. The reason we were in the hole is that y'all fund the DAs only for salaries and for travel. And I think it was around 2008 during the Purdue administration, during the month of June, we were told cut X percent out of your budget. Well, listen, we had nothing to cut but personnel. We weren't going to call off court for the last 2 weeks of June, so we kept people on the payroll, we paid them, and then the very next month, we let everybody know, all right, y'all, we got to start furloughing people in order to pay the state back this money. Now, I'm not an accountant, but we found out much to our chagrin, even though we were doing what we thought was right, we were told, well, you can't pay back money in 1 year that you overspent in the year before. So we had this argument with them for years about, you know, how are we going to get out of this hole then? We furloughed our people and sent them home. Every furlough day was a 5% pay cut for those employees. We furloughed during the bad years 24 furlough days, which to the best of my knowledge and belief was the most furlough days in the judicial branch. In the executive branch, DFACS was hit much worse than us for furloughs. But the reason I want to talk about that is because those people that were with us starting back in 2007 and are still with us today, they lived through those furloughs, they lived through those reductions in their income, and some of them are still sticking with us. They're not bailing on us to go get jobs in private practice. Now, we are losing some to become prosecutors in the counties. We're losing some to other state agencies. But if you look at the people that are leaving us, that average of 7 years, if you look at the blue sheet, I wanted to put a face on the prosecutors that we're talking about that have stayed with us. I had PAC do a computer search and shoot me out a name at random of somebody who came to work with us in 2007, before the furloughs and the freeze and the steps started. And I got the name of Kevin Macheska. Kevin works in the Toombs Judicial Circuit at 6 rural counties northeast of Augusta. There are no local funded assistant DAs in that circuit. And his job duties include prosecuting all the felonies and misdemeanors in Glasscock County, all the juvenile court cases in all 6 counties, all the misdemeanors in McDuffie, a portion of the felonies in McDuffie, handles all the appellate work for 1 county and most of the other 5 counties because he's just an outstanding legal researcher, and the other people in the DA count on him for that. He was admitted to the bar and hired with us in 2007 at a starting salary of $42,081. Now, with over 7 years' experience prosecuting every day for the people of that circuit, his current salary is $46,200. And it's only come up that little bit because of the last 2 years y'all have given us revenue to increase our people for a half a step in the last 2 years. What we're asking y'all to do is get us back on re-implementing our salary schedule and our step increases for our assistant DAs so that we can maintain a professional prosecution staff in our offices. I turned 60 this past weekend. I've been with the DA's office for 31 years. There are a number of DAs in the association that are in their 50s and early 60s because we're in the first class of prosecutors in this state that the legislature determined back in the early 1980s we can't have people come to the DA's office, train for two years, and then go out and make money in private practice. We need to have a stable professional prosecution staff. So the legislature in the early 80s started this salary schedule, and because we had the regular steps in the salary schedule, we were able, people like me looked at this and realized, well, I'm not going to make a lot of money doing this, not like in private practice, but this can be a decent income. I could raise my family on this, and we can sleep good at night with what we do for a living. So in this item 8.2.6, the lion's share of this, the $1.5 million, is to get us started back and catch up our assistant DAs to where they should be on the salary schedule, much like y'all did for the State Patrol and you did for the GBI that you finished up their 3-year cycle just last year. We're asking you to start this in July and over a 3-year period help catch us up where we should be with our assistant DAs. As far as the investigators, it's less money, $264,000 almost. Let me talk to you just a second about DA investigators, because I thought about when I heard Director Keenan talk about his agents that y'all have helped get caught up and talked about their qualifications were the same as the FBI, and I thought, well, you know, my state paid my state paid investigator, he has a bachelor's degree from Valdosta State University. He's a graduate of the FBI Academy. He had 12 years as an investigator of the Lowndes County Sheriff's Office before I hired him 10 years ago. And there was a salary schedule that said, well, you come on with us here, and, you know, 10 years from now that you can expect to be over here. He's been left behind now by the Valdosta Police Department, Lowndes County Sheriff's Office, again, because he was locked in for those 6 years.
And finally, the smallest amount of money, almost $115,000, we're asking for our secretaries, our legal assistants, just to bring them up on par with people in the judicial branch doing that type of work. So that is, well, and let me talk to you. One other thing I meant to mention about the investigators, the kind of work that he does. I talked about his qualifications. The kind of work he does. We send him out into the worst neighborhoods to find our witnesses to come to court so that we can actually prove our cases, because obviously we've got to have the witnesses to do that. He's certified as a fingerprint examiner, so he can help with that too. You know, just about a year ago, a classic example of the type of work that DA investigators are doing is when the armed gunman rolled up at the Forsyth County Courthouse, pulled up in that car and shot a Forsyth County deputy who was out walking around the grounds. It was 2 DA investigators who took their guns and ran out to meet that man and confront him. So this is the quality of the people that we're talking about and the type of people that we want to help get caught up.
Any questions by the committee?
On 8.2.7, I would want to mention that briefly.
Let me
yes, sir.
Stop you, and
yes, sir.
Before we get too far ahead of ourselves, and I appreciate your passion. On 8.2.6, on increasing those funds, did we give you $867,000 last year for that? I went back and did some checking, and I think that's what was reported.
That would have been the money for the half-step increase
I see.
that y'all gave.
And we did the same thing the year before?
Right. So,
gotcha.
So over a 2-year period, we have come up 1 step after a 6-year freeze.
Okay. And this would put them how high, roughly? I mean, is this...
I'm
new at this, so I'm
this will put them 6 steps along that they were frozen at for that period of time. Now, the example that I gave you on Kevin, that is the worst case scenario. Okay, you take people who are over in class 4 and just a few steps away from maxing out, because you, as a prosecutor, as an assistant DA, you max out after 20 years on the scale. Those people only have maybe 2. I've got 3 in my office that within 3 years they'll be completely maxed out, and there won't be anything else there unless y'all decide to give merit pay increases. But what we're trying to do is catch up the people who are leaving us and most at risk at leaving us.
Representative Hightower.
Is there a set salary schedule for
yes, sir.
incoming ADAs that
yes,
we
sir.
have? It's not, so it doesn't change from county to county. It's set across.
No, it's set. And by the way, that salary that Kevin's making right now, that's the same salary that somebody's making that's been prosecuting with us for 2 years.
Okay.
So the person that's got 2 years' experience that's coming in, they're making the same amount of money as Kevin, who's been at it over 7 years. There could be a county paid assistant that's not necessarily on this chain, but if you're a state paid assistant, you're on this, everybody's in the same scale. Some counties don't pay as much as the state scale. Some counties actually pay better, and the county position is the better position to have.
And that's done as kind of a supplement to their own county?
It's done as an additional budget from the county for the DA. There's a lot of counties, particularly in the metro areas, that get more money from the county than they do the state. That's not the general rule, but certainly in the metro area it can be.
Kind of like our judges in certain areas.
They get additional budget from the county office.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, Representative. Go ahead, sir.
On 8.2.7, that is an increase that we're asking for the supplement, the state supplement for our chief assistant DAs. For instance, in my circuit, my chief assistant has been with us 28 years. He's maxed out, so he's under this money, he gets no additional money. Any ADAs that have maxed out on the pay scale, they're not getting any additional money under this request. But the assistant DAs were given, the chief assistants were given a $100 a month supplement in 1984 by the General Assembly. There has never been an increase because we've never had the money to give them an increase. We think that it's reasonable to bump that increase up to $500 a month for the chief assistant. That chief assistant has supervisory powers over the other assistant DAs and many of the other office personnel. And that just seems like a reasonable amount of money. If you look at other state agencies of people that are in the number 2 and the number 3 position, the separation between those and many agencies, including law enforcement agencies, is about $6,000, which is what this
184?
Sir?
1984 is when they were given that?
1984 is when the $100 started, and it's never changed. There would only be 49 positions.
Representative Coomer.
Thank you. Going back to the last point we were talking about on the ADA salaries, is there any prohibition on a local government combining are basically making a supplement to the state salary, so if the state salary is $42,000, can the county add to that from other funds and make that pay
yes,
position
they can,
higher?
and some do. But for instance, Kevin, in the Tomb Circuit, they don't get supplements. They don't have any additional state-funded employees. What they get from the state is what they use to prosecute with.
And is it also true that there are some circuits that have assistant district attorneys who are not paid anything from the state, like they're completely county created?
Yes, but the larger counties have to operate that way because, we only get one per judge plus 2 or 3, depending on whether or not you've got an accountability court. So I'm in a sort of what's called a transitional circuit down in Valdosta and 4 rural counties. I have 8 state-paid assistants. I have 8 circuit-paid from the county appropriations assistants. But you get into the metro area here, the overwhelming majority of their assistants are county-funded assistants because they can't do it with the state formula. But on the investigators, we all only have 1 state-funded investigator. We only have 2 state-funded secretary legal assistants, no matter what size you are.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
That's fine. I'm good.
Representative Hightower.
Is it common for a lot of ADAs to have vehicles? Because I know in some counties they do, and if they do have vehicles, is that from us or is that from
no vehicles from the state? Y'all do not provide vehicles to the district attorney's offices. Okay. Some of us are able to get vehicles from our counties. Some get it with asset forfeiture money. Some, like me, I have a very good working relationship with the Valdosta Police Department. When they rotate a car out, they will sell it to me for $1. And then we put those in use. And then all I have to do with my travel money is buy gasoline. Whereas if I have an assistant DA traveling Deckles County to go do court in his personal vehicle, I got to pay him that mileage, which is much more expensive than putting gasoline in an office vehicle.
Okay. Thank you.
That's practically how we survive. We scrimp and scrape and find what we can and get it done. If I could hit the last couple things, Mr. Chairman, I'll get out of your way. 8.2.2 is the DA travel. As you know, we discussed earlier the fact that we took that substantial cut over the last few years, or the previous years, and what we've done over the last 3 years is slowly ease back to where we're actually covering the state mandate, which is to cover the travel expenses for the district attorneys. So that $216,000 listed at 8.2.2 is based on the actual expense request from the district attorneys. And this year there was an additional 33 judicial circuits that asked for a little more money to make them whole. What we've had to do over the last few years is take the amount of money you give it, spread it proportionately over the circuits so that each of the circuits continue to get closer to being made whole. That's what that represents, is there's still 33 circuits that have got actual expenditures that are less than whole at this point. And keep in mind, just pointing out the next slide, one of the reasons that has continued to increase is we do have additional training and time tied up when we hire these new attorneys. In November, we run our basic course every year, or fundamentals, which our new prosecutor has to go to, and those classes have doubled in the average size they used to be. We used to average about 50 to 60 new ones per year that went through that. You'll see in 2013 we did 106, and in 2014 we did 104. So we have additional travel that goes with that.
Primarily due to your turnover and that.
Yes, sir. It is directly related to the turnover. 8.2.5 is just the continuation or the move over of the 2 assistant DAs that were reflected in the 2 new judgeships of last budget year, both the Coweta and Waycross circuits. We've got new judges, and this just carries over the amount of money into the budget to fund those. I make you aware of just one other thing that's out there. We've got some concern. We've received some information from Office of Planning and Budget about a statewide spread of allocation of additional employer retirement costs. And we point out that sometimes this gets overlooked. We have 2 statutory required circuits that we pay for solicitor state court staff retirement that's in code in both BIB and DeKalb, and we are concerned that those numbers did not get included in a number that we've been given that may be put in our budget. So we just make you aware of that. The last 2 things, 8.3.2, this is in the Prosecuting Attorneys Council budget. That's the $6,000 that we discussed earlier in continuation 15, and that's for actual expenditures for DOAS billings or risk premiums last year. We did put a note that we've been told to expect some sort of change in the spread of allocation, and that may very well wash itself. We just make you aware of that. The last new thing that we're actually asking for, and this is the new piece of the prosecuting attorney's budget, is at 8.3.1, and that is for a human resources generalist position. That's $73,000. That's based on a $45,000 a year budget. Let me basically explain what this is about. We continue to accrue our responsibilities for HR. In the last 2 years, we've had 12 of the 49 elected district attorneys change office. That in and of itself creates a great deal of personnel turnover and then personnel transactions. We've added 31 new assistant DAs in the previous 2 years between accountability courts and 2 judgeships each year. So we've seen a significant turnover. If you'll see on the next page, we've done you basically a per 100 employees average of state agencies that do similar business to what we do. If you take that and take into effect prior to 2013, we were averaging a little over 1,100 transactions a year from an HR standpoint. The last several years have seen that number double. We're over 2,200 transactions per year, and we have not added any employees to help with that. And if you take that into consideration with the budget request to up to 26 more assistant DAs, then we're overwhelmed, quite frankly, and we are asking for that position to be created at the PAC just to support the ongoing operations of the district attorneys in this state. And I'll yield to any further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions from members of the committee? The chair wishes to recognize you, gentlemen, and those in the audience. We fully know what you do to protect us, and we appreciate you. I truly want you to know that, and that is heartfelt. I've been around our DAs and our prosecutors since I was 15 years old and was a boy bailiff in Douglasville, Georgia. And I've had great admiration for you and for everybody that works for you. Thank you much, and thanks for your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee.
In fact, the first time I was chewed out by a judge, I was 15 years old for not wearing my coat to court. And speaking of that, we have the Supreme Court. Mr. Chief Justice, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's our pleasure and honor to be here with you today. Talking about FY16, and I want to thank you for your diligence and your thoroughness in looking at the amended 15 budget. The first 5 items on our enhancements for 16 are just annualizations of the first of those items that we had on our FY15. So all we did, and you approved all of those, and we just passed those over on an annual basis to the FY16 budget. But I'll be happy to try to answer any questions you have with regard to any of those first 5 items.
Okay. And just for the members of the committee, if I haven't told you, we're going to have a separate hearing on judicial compensation later next week. So we're just addressing the other matters of the budget. And do I have any questions from those in the committee?
Yes.
Chairman Weldon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief Justice.
Yes, sir.
Judge, great to have you guys here. The case management position you got in 10.1.3.
Yeah, I hadn't gotten to that yet, but I will.
Okay, all right. Well, in that case, I'll reserve my question for later. If I could just courtesy when I come before you.
I have the same problem at home.
Chief Justice, I can't control him. I can only hope to contain him. So go right ahead, sir.
Well, I know the answers we get are based on the framing of the question, so I don't know. But thank you. The next item we have down there is the give back, if you will, of $306,785. That was a one-time enhancement item that allowed us to move from Novell over to Microsoft as our computer platform. And that really runs everything now, but we don't need that but that one time, so that's going back in the budget. But to answer the question that has been posed, this new case management position is really our hallmark item for this year. We have, as you know, like all state agencies, all state branches, been severely hampered and crippled, if you will, in some ways, by the recession that we've been through since 2007. We lost a number of positions during that financial crunch. We're still down 3 positions even today. But we have, with your help, been able to add some positions back over the years as the need was presented and was documented to you. And we hope to do that again, yet again, with this case management position, because our employees now in the clerk's office are having to do their full job, but do the work of essentially another person. We have 2. We did spread it over 3, but we have 2 people doing it now. They're doing their full load plus doing half of another person's load. We have this year experienced something over 34% new filings of cases. We have also experienced something over 50% new habeas petitions. Over the last 5 years, our caseload has increased by 20% a year, and we are quite frankly to the point of wondering if we can ask our employees to do more than they already do. They work very hard. Everybody in state government, I think you will hear, make a case for diligent hard work, long hours. But I can attest that our people do that, and I just don't know how much more we can ask them to do with what they're already doing. We have very little control over the numbers of cases that come in. As you know, the population's going up. The caseloads of judges working across the state increases, and appeals increase too. So we're just asking for some help in managing those cases as they're filed. We take great pride in trying to turn out a very fine product in a reasonable period of time. And we want to ensure that we're still able to do the people's business and get cases decided properly, get them filed properly, get them triaged properly, get them assigned properly, get them argued, if you will, properly, but get them treated properly so that we can continue to do good service in a reasonable period of time. And this person would help us immeasurably in that regard. Now, we think we can hire somebody for a little better than $42,000. By the time you throw all the frills in there, it runs it up to just south of $70,000. But we think we can hire somebody adequate, who we can train and who will do a very, very competent job at that position for that amount of money.
Judge Caldwell.
Justice answered my question with his next statement, and my question was going to be, is the 69, is that net salary or does that include benefits? And
that includes benefits.
And
yes.
Then my other question is going to be, what would be the qualifications of that individual?
I will let our clerk answer that. Ms. T. Barnes, if you don't know, is our wonderful clerk. I have standing with me Presiding Justice Hines, and we've got Justice Melton on the front row out there that you already are well acquainted with. Also have our Chief Deputy Clerk, Ms. Tim Milton, back here, and our physical person right behind me where she needs to be, Ms. Regina Jones. But Ms. T. Barnes, I think, could probably best address that.
But we've had great success in hiring new graduates from paralegal programs, and that's, I've hired 2 recently, and that would be what we're looking for.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question, Mr. Chief Justice. And I understand, I think I got a feel for your need based on what you've been through. The thing that I'm trying to get a grip on is, and we're talking about hiring a paralegal out of college. This paralegal is going to make what that assistant DA is making after 7 years of prosecuting. And I'm not saying it's not worth it. I'm just saying that we certainly need to do something for that assistant DA if he gets caught up with a new grad out of paralegal school. I was just watching the two numbers, and I'm not saying anybody's not worth the money. I'm saying somebody got caught up with awful quick.
Representative Weldon. Mr. Chairman Weldon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And with that response, the folks that you're hiring, you're the Supreme Court of Georgia, right? That you're the top of the top. The cream rises to the top, right? And what we're talking about is, excuse me while I'm, if you'll just excuse me a second. What you're asking for is you're looking for somebody who can come in and work with, on the level and with the level, have the upward mobility with you guys, right? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to just savor the moment if I could.
While you're doing that, Your Honor, I'd like to. The chair would like to recognize my judge from my home county, Judge Kelly. Used to be our DA,
sure,
and is our newest Superior Court judge and my good friend. And I've neglected to recognize him and welcome. I don't get many folks visiting me up here from home, and the chair just wants to reach out to you, Judge, and thank you for being here. Go ahead, Your Honor.
Yes, sir. The next enhancement item we have is our e-records project. This was Trevere, which is a vendor. They show up in our budget elsewhere, but they do several different functions. One is up under item 5. This is where we have gone to 100% e-filing, and they're our e-filing vendor. They upkeep the docket for attorneys e-filing. But this particular position, number 8, is our e-records project. We have now, I think this is a very moving target, but somewhere around 50 clerks who have gotten themselves in a position to electronically file records with us so that they can come up. The last execution we had, instead of when they completed the habeas case down in Butts County, instead of loading all of that record up on a deputy's car and driving it all the way to Atlanta, and then us looking at it and driving it all the way back down there, they just e-filed the whole record up to us. And it made it much easier on them, much easier on us. We can search an electronic record much easier than we can a paper record. I remember a number of years ago that I had a case that had about 15,000 pages of transcript, and attorneys had cited it, but they hadn't cited it properly, and we were trying to find it in the record. Had law clerks lying all over the floor and at every desk, every place that they could get in my office from all over our floor, trying to find in the record where they said that particular thing was. So electronically we can do that, you know, with just words and phrases, but we couldn't do it very easily back then. But that's what that is. And Trevere is a well-recognized, well-positioned in terms of reputation vendor that is situated out in Utah. And they, for a very competitive, very modestly priced fee, give us the very best hope of having the best quality we can as far as a vendor. So that's why we picked them, and the annual fee for that is going to be $20,000. And the last thing we have, number 9, is an increase to reflect adjustment to the employer's share employees' retirement system, and we have no control over that, as I understand. And if we stop right there, what we're asking for in the 2016 budget is 3.28% less than our budget this year.
And we appreciate that.
Yeah, we do too.
Any questions from the committee? Your Honor, if you, never mind, I'm sorry, there is one. Representative Coomer.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Justice.
Yes, sir.
Just a question on your handout, second handout, noted that there are direct and cross appeals are up 40%, 2014 to 15. Can you give us any explanation as to why you'd have a 40% increase in 1 year?
No, sir, I can't. Not really. There, I mean, I think that everything is going to increase because of population, because of we have about 45, 46,000 members of the bar now. We have a lot of people doing a lot of things that result in them ending up in court. And I think that despite the fact that a lot of courts work very hard, I think some people feel that they want to take something all the way to the Supreme Court. So, and P.J. Hines may have something he want to add to that.
Representative Coleman, I'd say this. Years ago when you did criminal work, you may have a case that was tried, a resolution was reached, and let's say a guilty verdict was that resolution and a sentence was imposed. It may not be appealed. It is a rarity, I would say now, for any felony, which is adjudicated not by plea but by a jury trial or possibly even a non-jury trial, is not appealed. It is simply going to be appealed, and I believe that will continue in the future. And you will see, you know, the lower court will have a motion for reconsideration, motion for new trial, an appeal. It will come to an appellate court. And I'm talking about now the murder cases, which we have direct appeals to. Certainly the other matters with the Court of Appeals. But, you know, you'll have that, and then you'll have a motion for reconsideration up here. The Chief mentioned death penalty cases. I tried 3 when I was on the Superior Court bench. And you had to block out, if you took motions and everything, you're talking about 6 weeks if you're fortunate. The records which come on those, lady and gentlemen, are stacks. Now it's on an e-filing now, but you still have just tremendous amounts of records. Also, when you have an e-filing, remember this too. Like whenever, you know, like when they said computers are going to do away with less paperwork and all this. Well, truth be told, when you have something you can do it quicker, more people do it. So I anticipate the e-filing, which is a great thing, but will probably generate even more filings.
I appreciate that, and I certainly understand that as an explanation for overall increase in caseload.
You come across appeals.
Yes, sir. I'm just wondering why there is a single year increase of 40%. That seems, have you been seeing that kind of rate of increase year over year in recent years, or is that an anomaly? We only have a 2-year track.
Over the last 5 years, we have a 20% increase.
Right. The rate, I think, has been increasing, Representative Coleman. In other words, it's, let's say, X here, next year it's going to be X plus.
And I also, Chief, if I may, Justice Nami is asking the same question, and if you've been before him, you know you better have.
He's a brilliant man.
One thing I do believe is happening is the clerk's offices across the state were understaffed.
Yes.
And in this last year or two, they're getting more people, and the last thing that people deal with are appeals, because those are things they can attach a letter saying, we did our best, but we really had to take longer. And I think, honestly, that's a big part of it, that they're actually moving things out that have been sitting in the clerk's offices for a while.
So you think it may be a result of clearing out backlogs?
It could be clearing out backlogs. I ran the numbers again, and the 20 to 27% is still accurate, and whether that's our new normal or not, I won't be able to tell you until we have more months. But at least for the first term, we had a huge increase that added to our oral argument calendar. It was significant.
I think anecdotally, as I said, that the e-filings, because you can do this quicker and all that, they're going to move quicker. So for a while, you're going to see that jump. As they go on.
Representative Evans.
Well, I know over my lifetime, we have a lot more people trying to make money practicing law. Actually practicing law, not just with a legal education and doing something else, but actually practicing law. And attorneys have told me over years now that there's great competition for the client's dollar. And they're doing more and more what the client wants them to do rather than giving good advice about client management. The really good lawyers that I've known over my lifetime have been people who were very honest with the client and say, look, you shouldn't do that, you shouldn't do this. We've got no chance of winning. I'm not going to waste your time and money and my time doing that. And so I don't know if it's a problem with the bar not managing their clients well, or maybe it's just that people really are trying to scuff out a living in a tough environment. I don't know.
Fine.
Well, that's just my guess at it. I don't have all the answers.
But given the budgetary impact that those actions have, I guess I would just ask the judiciary to consider that they might be able to impact those actions when they are calling us out.
We always try to call them as we see them. If you're right, you're right. If you're wrong, you're wrong. And we try to tell them when they're wrong.
Well, that's the last question, I think, from this committee. We've got
well, thank you again for your interest and time. It's refreshing to us to see that you're managing our tax dollars so well.
Chief Justice, thank you. Thank you very much.
Very much.
Madam Clerk, thank you. We have the Court of Appeals. Well, we have the Court of Appeals back with us.
Yeah, come on up, Jim.
Justice, thank you. Thank you for being here. Call the committee to order. And go ahead, sir. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. We appreciate this opportunity to appear before you this afternoon. We are in somewhat a similar position as the Supreme Court. We are trying to recover positions that we lost a few years ago in our central staff. We are still down 3 positions that we recovered with your help, 2 positions in recent years, but we also down a position in the fiscal office. And I'm not going to take up the time to tell you about the great caseload we have. We've lost positions in the last several years, but we haven't lost any workload. And as you can see, most of our expenditures are for personnel and IT services. It's basically impossible to do all that we have to do in today's world without a high-functioning IT service and the personnel that we need. I'm going to just mention some things generally, and I'm going to call on my colleagues. I have Presiding Judge Doyle here, and our clerk, Steve Caslin, our fiscal officer, Jan Kelly, and I believe Judge Ray is here too. Judge Ray is here. So I'm going to call on some of them to talk to you more specifically about areas that they supervise, and they know more directly the detail and the urgency of our needs. We have network maintenance costs that I'm going to ask the clerk to talk about, and we've got other IT costs that we are asking you about a conversion of microfilm to a more searchable PDF format. We want to increase the software for our docket maintenance system, and we are also beginning to get in a position to receive records electronically from the trial courts. And we are asking also for some assistance in paying for the training that our lawyers are required to do annually. We have in chambers, each judge, we have 12 judges, each judge has 3 in chambers attorneys, that's 36, and we have 7 right now in central staff. And those attorneys, as you know, are required to do annual CLE. And a few years ago, the court had to discontinue providing that CLE for the lawyers, and we have been able to provide only 6 of the 12 hours that they need. So we are asking for funding to cover the remaining 6 hours, and we think that's extremely important, but because I'm not aware of any other agency where the employees have to pay for the training that's required to do the job. And so we are asking for your assistance in that regard also. And I'm going to, at this time, I'm going to call on Judge Doyle. She's a presiding judge on our court, and she has the primary responsibility for supervising our central staff and the clerk's office. So she knows firsthand about the needs in central staff and the day-to-day requirements. She's responsible for assigning lawyers when there's an emergency in chambers, and chambers need help, and we have to pull people out of central staff. So I'm going to let her come up and tell you more about the urgency of that need.
Thank you, Judge. Welcome.
Yep, thank you all for having us today. I didn't get an opportunity to do this the last time I was here, and so I want to kind of fill you in a little bit about, okay, why is it we keep asking to come back for more central staff? And we went back and we looked at all the numbers, and in the last 4 to 5 years, we've had between 3,100 to 3,400 cases filed in our court. Using the 3,100 number, if you have 7 central staff, that is 443 jurisdiction reviews that they have to do per person. And we have approximately 1,000 applications a year. And an application is when the parties don't get a right of direct appeal, and so they would like us to appeal, and so they file a brief and they attach all of the documentation from the motions and the orders and the depositions, whatever might be relevant in the case. And then that initially goes through central staff. And the central staff, then, that would be 143 applications per person that they do now, which equates to approximately 3 term papers a week, taking no vacation. And that is for every single one of them. And what they do is they analyze these applications, and they have to do it in also a very tight time frame. Unlike our opinions, which we do get out in 2 terms, we do have requirements there, they have to do this in 30 to 45 days depending on the type of application. So it has to be looked at, reviewed, researched, and then summarized to be sent on to the chambers to get it out within a time period. So these are people who have to be highly skilled and understand the law. But that is, they're usually anywhere from 10 pages to 20 pages long. They're kind of like mini opinions because they're going through and analyzing, is this, what's going on. So it's not a short endeavor. And with the jurisdiction, it also is, some of them might be simple to look at, but some of them can take a week long to do because it's a convoluted situation. And so that's a lot of work. Back in 2008, we had 10 people in the office, and they would be doing, let's say, about 300 of those. And so as the numbers go down, well, that's great and all, but in the last 4 months, we have had 4 chambers that have needed assistance because one of their permanent staff attorneys has been out on essentially what we call long-term leave, from anywhere from 6 weeks to 3 months either. Most of these actually have been for serious medical situations, either for themselves or a family member. And so if you take it and you take 4 people out of our central staff and you put them into 8 chambers, because that work never stops. That's the constant drafting of the opinions, which is, you got to draft 1 or 2 a week in chambers to get the work done in the 2 terms. That is reducing dramatically with those people in central staff. So that work for that 4 months multiplies. So it is a high pressure, high intense, and so for every person we get up, it makes it a much more reasonable situation. And we have currently someone out on maternity leave. I've got a request here in a couple months because someone has to go out in surgery in Chambers, and that's what I know about. So there is always a need in Chambers to pull people in. So we never have a full complement of 7 people doing it. And when we had 10, I think it worked fairly well. But like I said, we still have increased workload and things along those lines. So that's why we keep coming back for more in that, and we hope that you will seriously consider giving us that position starting July 1st. With respect to the fiscal office, we have asked for both in 2015 and in 2016 an accountant position. And back in 2008, we lost the position, went from 4 to 3, and we consolidated essentially the kind of backup accounting and the purchasing and facilities. And that worked okay. But we knew that we were going to need another position at some point in time when we got the money back, because the purchasing and the facility sort of dominates, and this backup accounting just isn't, the person can't do it all very well. Jan, of course, is great, so she's been, handling her load and somebody else's. Why we really need this now, we knew we asked for it back in August, is in December, we lost our only other accountant in the office. She resigned. And so now we no longer have someone who is even in an accountant position. We were able to move some of the facilities and purchasing and fill that role, but we really desperately need the accountant to come back in. And it basically just from good accounting practices, backup, and some other things that maybe Jan could add into it. But, just being able to have, if something happened to our accounting person, no matter what it would be, there would be no one there who could handle it. And we have currently had to hire a retired employee to come in and help get some work done with the loss of our accountant in December. And so we've got that person on the payroll. It would be much cheaper to have someone permanent in there to be able to do the job. So if y'all have any questions about those particular positions, I'm happy to answer anything.
Any questions from the committee? Judge, go ahead, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Concerning your full-time central staff attorney, what will that individual make as a starting salary? I see you've got $154,000. I assume that's benefits and so forth. Is that?
Yes, it would be. I don't know exactly what the,
I believe it's around $95,000.
Okay, $95,000.
And how much experience do they have to have?
You know what, I will tell you this, with a central staff, most of our central staff attorneys have been people who either have worked in chambers at the court for a significant amount of time, 10, 15 years, and so these are your senior attorneys. The reason why it is you have to have somebody who has experience like that in central staff is they're getting all of the applications, which deals with every type of law you can possibly imagine, and they have to be able to issue spot, decide whether it's merits, warranting, granting the appeal, and do so in about a 10-day period. So somebody fresh off the street who is just out of law school is not going to have that kind of experience. They're just not going to be capable of doing that kind of work. So generally, we have people who have been around for a while who move into those positions, into the central staff. So that's why it's a little bit, that's not the top of our scale. That's like a fifth, I think at the 5-year, we've got, 10 years, I think, in about $113,000 when you get up there. So it's kind of in the middle.
Well, if they move in, where do they move in from?
Well, sometimes people come in from chambers, or we've had people who, a lot of people work at the court and then maybe go out in private practice. We have a lot of people who will, apply if they hear we have a central staff opening, that's someone who's been in chambers before, but maybe wanted to go out and try to make more money in private practice, and then they decide that they love the court and want to come back. So a lot of times we get a lot of applications from people who've already been there before. Or certainly sometimes people in chambers decide that they want to move and their judges are okay with that. And we've got a lot of people who have done that.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Weldon, Chairman Weldon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Judge, thank you for being here. The in 5.1.3, there is a $36,876 increase for the network maintenance due to the Supreme Court leaving the shared network. I guess I don't really understand how that came about. Is this the shared network for LexisNexis or Westlaw? Or?
No. So,
Is
you know,
this
last year y'all gave the Supreme Court money to build the Microsoft, which runs their whole IT system. And I am not an IT person, so I'm going to talk in just layman's terms as best I can tell. Before that, the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court, we both use the same one, and I think there's another, maybe the State Court Council. There's a couple of other who share off this network, and we pay a cost for maintenance. And because the Supreme Court has their own now, we still have the cost of that maintenance, and we have to absorb what would have been paid out of the Supreme Court budget.
Okay.
That's why.
Okay.
Yeah, and maybe if you need to add anything.
Our clerk may have something to add to that. He's directly involved with the IT and that issue with the Supreme Court.
Okay. Is that what happened? Just different networks? Y'all, the Supremes and the Court of Appeals are on the same network, and then y'all just separated those, and they have their own, and then you have your independent. Okay. Thank you. And if I may, Mr. Chairman, one other question. The increased funds for trial court records maintenance on 5.1.5, that $20,000, is that a cost that was incurred as a direct result of a contract?
Sir,
or a change?
You may have heard the Supreme Court talk about that figure, 20,000. It's exactly the same. This is for software maintenance for the trial court records project. Just so you know, the Supreme Court is ahead of us on the trial court records and getting records in the lower courts, and we're going behind them so that they can experiment with it, see what the problems are. So when we come in with a lot more cases, they've already had the problems, and we've learned from what they've done.
Okay.
You going to tell them about the microfilm?
Representative Hightower.
Just a quick question. You said it's the same as the Supreme Court. Is that 20,000? Is that needed for each individual court?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, because we have separate records. So when it comes up to us, it's all in our system, and then
if it was the same, I was wanting to make sure.
Yeah, it's a similar type of cost, but we each have our own. And there is another line item. I don't know if you want to go back through. I only stopped at the top two, but obviously y'all are talking about some of the IT. Down here at the very bottom is the one-time request for $120,000, and our clerk will talk more about this. But this deals with conversion. We have a lot of stuff on microfilm. Do you remember this? When you go to the library and you go get a thing in. Well, it's very hard to work with, and maintaining this machine is becoming almost impossible. And so we have people who want to get into some of these old records, and we're trying to take all this old microfiche and convert it into something that it would be a very simple process. And so that's essentially what that request is. And Steve, you can.
From 1992 to 2009, we put all our records on microfilm. That's when the archive stopped taking our records. And so we've got over 1,000 rolls of microfilm. Each one of those rolls has about 5,000 images on it. And when folks come in to do research, we sit them down at one of these terminals. Sometimes the machine will break, and so we go to a museum to find replacement parts. It's a ridiculously antiquated process, and so we're going to put all that in a PDF searchable format, stick it up on our docket, our web page, so somebody can just go there and easily access all this information. We think it'll take about 6 months to complete the entire project, and it's going to certainly increase the practitioners' access to records once we do that.
Representative Coomer.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk, is the $120,000 based on some specific bids you've received, or what's that number?
I specifically did not get specific bids, because if you give us some money, then we'll go out and start bidding the project. But it did come from a very educated guess of a couple of folks who do this, sending them the stuff, asking approximately what they're going to charge for it. It's not as simple as just somebody doing it, because there's all kinds of other benefits that can be derived depending on how much you want to spend on the searchable and access and other types of things. But that's a really, really good, close estimate of what it's going to cost.
Okay. And then back up, I had another question, same issue that Chairman Weldon was asking about on the network maintenance costs. I just want to point out both as part of my question and to the committee members, the 5.1.3 is an increase based on the Supreme Court leaving the shared network, and then you look over on the Supreme Court budget, and they've got an increase cost. Get back over here. In line 10.1.6, increased funds to annualized additional yearly cost for a new network of $37,200. Can y'all speak to how that is an efficient use of state funds to have one come out of the network to create a new network and double the cost?
I know that it's something that both us and the Supreme Court briefed to both chambers last year when the Supreme Court got the authorization for that, for the Supreme Court to go off. I know there was an expenditure so they could get in the I believe the Microsoft system. They wanted to go down that road. It worked best for their system. We don't believe it works best for our system at this point. It's one of those other things. We're going to see what they do and how things work out with them. Right now it makes sense for both of our courts to have separate systems. And I don't remember all the details from the last budget briefings, but I do remember the Supreme Court is very much on board wanting to have their own separate system for doing that.
Do you know, and maybe the question is better directed to the Supreme Court, but I don't know if anybody, well, I see Justice Melton is still here. I don't know if you want to speak to it a little bit or not.
What they're saying is exactly right. And the other aspect that we discussed with the legislature last year was, as we move to Microsoft, we would build our system so that if the Court of Appeals decided at a later date to jump on board, it would be open, and then we'd be able to do that with very limited cost to the state. But right now, just perception of the needs going forward, we felt like Microsoft was our best direction going forward. They had a different view, but we tried to build it in an open fashion so that they could come on board if they chose to do so on later.
Yeah, and I think we thought that, with the idea of ours is still operational, they can split, using ours while they're building that, and then, we do think it works well. We're not exactly the same in everything we do because we have a much larger amount of cases that come through and that sort of thing. But we did do it in such a way that I think it would be a very minimal cost if down the road we all looked at it and said, okay, wait a minute, Microsoft now is where we all should go. We could then convert at some point, but it just wasn't I think practically the way we would do it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Chairman Wilder.
Mr. Chairman.
He weighs.
Was there any other question? I'd just like to say we appreciate all you do to help us get the personnel and the technology that we need to do our work, because in Georgia our appellate courts are unique in the nation in that we have the two-term rule, and that means the case has to be out within the 2 terms after it gets to us. And in order to do that, we have to have the personnel and the technology to do it. When a case is filed on appeal in Georgia, the parties know that they will have a decision within several months rather than several years, as in some states. And that's a good thing, but in order to do that, you have to have the personnel and the technology that's required. And we appreciate all of your assistance in helping us do that, because it's important work and it just keeps coming.
Well, thank you, Judge, and we do appreciate all you do, and thank you for your very detailed testimony. We may submit some questions to you if you don't mind a little later. Thank you much. Okay. Okay. And last but certainly not least, Superior Court. I'm sorry for keeping your way. We're a little bit behind, but not complete. So we'll spend all the time we need, hopefully. So.
And I'll try to rock. I'll try to rock and roll a little bit for you. Well, thank you, thank you. We don't disagree. And we try to provide good service for our compensation. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Mary Staley. I'm president of the Council of Superior Court Judges. I have with me as well President-elect Brenda Weaver, and our Secretary-Treasurer Horace Johnson is on the front row. Also, fellow Superior Court judges that are with us, Kathy Goslin, Lawton Stevens, Stephen Kelly, and Stan Gunner are here. Of our staff, we have with us our Executive Director, Sandy Lee, and we have Charles Miller, who is our Financial Director. Looking to Section 9 before you, 9.1, this is funding for the Council of Superior Court Judges. There's been an increase in the employer contribution rate for the ERS, and that comes to $20,244. That's something that we have no control over, but something that needs to be addressed in our budget.
9.1.1.
Do you see that? And then the next page would be 9.2. These are requests regarding judicial administrative district programs. As you all are aware, in Georgia, court administration is provided by dividing the state into 10 districts, and these are the judicial administrative districts. And the court administration is provided through the services such as setting up accountability courts, things of that nature. There's an enormous amount of work that's done by the district court administrators in these districts to get accountability courts set up, to deal with seminars for divorcing parents, to deal with alternative dispute resolution. It's a huge job, and it's a particularly important service, especially when you get into the less affluent communities that don't have any other support. My county, we have a court administrator. We're a more affluent metropolitan community. When you get into, we were talking about southeast and southwest Georgia earlier, they don't have that, and these people are critical to access to justice in communities that are more remote and less affluent. So that's what these budgets are about. These budgetary items are about some of the poorest areas of Georgia, most particularly. The first item is to increase funds to reflect an adjustment in the employer share of the employee's retirement system, just as in the previous line item. Then 9.2.2, we would like to ask that you seriously consider to increase funds to restore a portion of operating expenses that have been reduced in prior years as a result of budget reductions. These are the operational funds I was talking about with the judicial administrative budget. Their budget is broken internally into 3 categories. There's salaries and benefits, that takes up 85%, so that's not very adjustable. Rent, utilities, that sort of thing is 7%. Again, that's not very fluid. What's left is 8% for operational spending, and that's for things like automobiles. You've got some district court administrators that are driving an hour and a half to get to a courthouse in a more less urban area. And of course their vehicles are aging, and there needs to be some replacing of that. This category was cut by 52% in the past during what we've all been talking about this afternoon, the recession and the draconian cuts that we all had to make to keep the balanced budget, and the difficult decisions that you all had to make about funding. This budget was cut 52% in the past. It's severely limited the ability of DCAs to travel through their circuits and the districts. It has been an impediment to those courts that are rurally located to have court administrators, boots on the ground, if you will, be able to go and service all those courts. So we would seriously ask you to take a hard look at this, and particularly these areas are the areas that accountability courts are coming to, and without the support of those DCAs, it will be extremely difficult to set up an accountability court without a DCA. I just set up a mental health court last year, and the DCA in the 7th District and our court administrator were critical to the success of that. The next item is 9.33. There are furlough days still built into our base budget. We would like to move toward eliminating those. This item is designed to restore the 3 furlough days that are remaining in our base budget.
Judge, let me ask you a question about that. Have y'all actually been taking the furlough days, or have you been correcting it with other areas of your budget?
We have. I'm sorry, that's ambiguous. We have not taken them. We have been able to basically scrimp and save and limp along. What the DCAs did so that they wouldn't have to furlough their employees last year was they cut back on their travel. So they weren't able to go into these outerlying areas as much as we would like to see. But no, we have not. Would you like me to move on to the next item?
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt you. I'll forget if you don't. So
I'm happy for you to interrupt
Especially
me.
at the end of a long day. Yeah.
I'm very appreciative for you to ask the questions. The next item is the Superior Court Judges Program. That's 9.3 on your line item. Our first item is 9.3.1, and I understand that that will be taken up next week. So we'll move on to 9.3.2. This is a request to increase funds for personal services for a step increase for 22 secretaries who've missed their step increases between January 1, 2012 and June 30, 2012. This is similar to requests that were made by other people appearing this afternoon. They had the same situation. There was a freeze for the secretary step increases March 1, 2009, and that was due to the budget reductions. Now, in fiscal year 15, funding was added for 30 secretaries who missed their step increase between March 1, 2009 and June 30, 2010. And we very much appreciate you all having done that for these people. The 1% merit increase that you authorized last year was used to provide an additional 21 secretaries who missed their step increases date between June 1, 2010 and December 31st, 2010. So we utilized those funds that you so generously gave us to get step increases to the next group of people that were eligible. Now this request this year is for the next 22 secretaries who've missed their step increases. And this is to ensure that our support staff is current with increases due to them. The next item is 9.3.3, and this is to increase funds for personal services for 2 law clerk positions. There were 14 non-statutory law clerk positions statewide when the budget reductions occurred, and we lost those. Last year, you generously funded 2 to us, and we would like to ask for 2 more this year so that we can start building up law clerks. Judges in Georgia do not all have law clerks. There is 1 law clerk per circuit. So some counties are generous or have the resources, and those judges each have law clerks. But you have judges in the state who do not have a law clerk. And in the areas that the executive committee of the Council of Superior Court Judges, when you are generous and fund these positions for us, then as a group we decide where they go, and it's based on need. I believe last year Judge Weaver received a law clerk, and she's running how many accountability courts? 4. So you can see the need, and if you can imagine doing that level of work plus travel, because you're not in a circuit where so you've got travel, you've got workload. Additionally, you've got the accountability courts. If you can imagine doing that without a law clerk, I know she's delighted you helped us last year, and I strongly urge you to consider this request for us.
I was smiling. I have traveled in Judge Weaver's court and been honored to appear before. And it's not easy. It's not quite as easy as traveling down where I'm from. So it's a little beautiful part of the country, but a little hard sometimes to travel.
Yeah, especially from down at St. Simon's. That's the one.
Actually came from Fannin, which is the northern.
Yeah, it is. It's beautiful, but it's windy. So.
And our next item is 9.3.4. and we're requesting an increase for funds for the creation of one additional judgeship in the Western Circuit effective July 1, 2015. It's been that additional judgeship for the Western Circuit was recommended by the Judicial Council Workload Assessment Committee. It was approved by the Judicial Council. The requested amount would fund the new judgeship for the entire fiscal year. For your information, and I know that's why Judge Stevens is here, he wants to shepherd this mightily. He's done a yeoman's job of that. But if, as a point of interest, Representative Regina Quick is preparing to drop that bill, I believe this week. Okay. The next item is item 9.3.5. And we would request that you increase funds to annualize the cost of the 2 new judgeships in the Coweta and Waycross circuits created in House Bill 742 in the 2014 legislative session. Only half of the funding was added in the previous legislative session, so we'll need that other half to keep those operations moving forward. Moving on to 9.3.6, this has to do with staff. This is to increase funds to reflect an adjustment in the employer share of the employees' retirement system, and that's a pass-through to us, something that we did not have decision-making ability over. 9.3.7, likewise, but this is for the judges, increased funds to reflect an adjustment in the employer share of the judicial retirement system. And like the other, I've mentioned it twice before, but I'm sure you all know that the JRS has increased the contribution rate from the employer share. Turning to 9.3.8, we would ask you to increase funds to restore the 1.5 furlough days that are remaining in our base budget. This is for secretaries and law clerks. We have only, and this goes to the question asked earlier, Chairman Atwood, have we had to take those furlough days? We have not, but the only reason has been because of the gap between the creation of a new judgeship and the time when the governor appoints the judge and the monies are being consumed. There's a gap there, and when there is a gap, then we're able to use those monies to avoid our people being furloughed. If the governor gets extremely efficient, we're going to have a problem. And so we would seriously ask that you take a hard look at that for us.
It's very hard for me not to quip about the government being efficient, but I'll let that one lie.
Position 9.3.9, and this is to reduce funds for the initial equipment set up for the Chattahoochee and Oconee new judgeships created in House Bill 451 in the 2013 legislative session. Since that's not ongoing need anymore, we need to have a reduction there to reflect that. And I'd be happy to answer any questions or let others who can do it more ably than me.
Representative Caldwell.
Judge, I want to ask you about, and I probably should have when you was on it, 9.2.2, if I'm reading that correct without my glasses. If you look at all of the other increases and all of the amounts of money, all of them end with like $18,051, $154,568. How did that one come out $100,000? Is that just a guess?
It's a good guess.
That's what I thought. You answered.
But no.
That's a no on it.
I would. It's going to cost some money, and I would like to ask Mr. Miller to step in on how the computation occurred.
They're trying to get restored about 25% of the cut they endured each fiscal year. So a quarter of that reduction they took is approximately $100,000.
Well, again, you said approximately. That's a good guess. I understand.
They're trying to go back and recapture. They got cut about as hard as any of us. It was a hard cut, and they're trying to recapture some of those resources.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since I don't practice law, I could just be very, very frank and blunt with you. I appreciate what you all do. You took some big cuts. You took a devastating veto at one point, and
That's true.
I don't practice law, but I'm not mad with any of you. I'm, but my big question is, how many circuits in Georgia, or is it, or are there any that does not get any county supplements?
Yes, is it two? There's one. Alapaha. There's one, Alapaha.
Just one?
But some are very modest, shall we say.
Oh, you've been kind. Some have been. So there's only one, and then there are varying degrees of supplements throughout the judicial circuits.
That's right.
You know, I'm not familiar with that. I knew that there were supplements, but I didn't know whether they were level or they were just so.
It's kind of like a home rule type thing. Mm-hmm. So in the local communities, they work with their local judges in determining that amount.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I think you've answered.
Representative, I could share that information with you.
I'd appreciate it.
Runs from about 120 so to over 180, and I've got that per circuit for you.
Would you share that, please?
I'll give that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for your service.
Thank you. Thank you for y'all.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're adjourned.